I am here from the ACLU to tell you about how to prevent the government from snatching your face. And we work in a number of different places. So we work in the courts, we work in the legislature, so where people make laws, and also within people's communities to try and defend the laws and the rights that are given to the people in this country based on the Constitution and the state laws. So ACLU is a national organization, but we have different affiliates in all the states. So I'm here from the ACLU Massachusetts, just in Boston. And here are some of the issues that the ACLU Massachusetts is currently working on. Everything from criminal justice reform to reproductive freedom, immigrants' rights, really all sorts of things. So we're really running the gamut there. Civil liberties are the liberties defined in the First Amendment. So who here has taken like a government civics class yet that you've studied the Constitution? Any of you, or not yet? No? You have. Okay, cool, we got one. So the First Amendment to the Constitution is here. I'm not going to read it because it's written in a funny way. It was written in 1700, so that's on them. But it defines 5 fundamental rights, civil rights. The right to freedom of religion. So basically you can worship and practice religion freely and the government can't stop you from doing that. Freedom of speech, so you can speak anonymously and broadly. Freedom of the press, so you can print and distribute information if you're, spreading flyers or in the news, on the radio. Freedom of assembly, so that means that you can associate and gather with whoever you want without the government telling you not to or interfering with that. And freedom of petition. So that means that you can criticize the government when you don't like what it's doing and protest, and the government can't stop you from doing that, which is clearly really important for a democracy. And so, surprise, surprise, we have some concerns that have come up when you talk about face surveillance in public and how it interacts with our civil liberties. So I'm going to go through 3 of these different kinds of concerns. 1, just the general dangers of this technology. 2, dangers that come from the lack of regulation, which we talked about a little bit earlier, but we'll get into a little more. And then finally, the threat to civil rights and liberties. So first, danger. I think Joy did a great job of explaining to us the dangers of this earlier today. We see that it's inaccurate. I mean, how many of us were misidentified by the software today alone, right? Yeah, a lot of us. It also, as we learned, has biases along race and gender axes. So if you're a darker skinned, feminine presenting person, then you're more likely to be mischaracterized by the software. Also, something I'm not sure we did touch on is that it also has an age bias. So these algorithms are trained on older, not like old, but like middle 20s plus year old faces. So if you're talking about children, it tends to misidentify and mischaracterize children more often too.
Okay, boomer. Sorry.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm no longer a child. As far as the regulation goes, as I think we've mentioned, facial recognition is already being used on local, state, and federal levels. So the Boston Police Department have used it, Massachusetts State Police have used it, the FBI, the CIA, ICE, Department of Homeland Security, all of these different agencies have been using this software for at least the past decade. With a couple scary aspects of that. There's no known oversight in a lot of these cases, so we don't have any information about who is looking down from above and making sure that people are using this information and this technology in a safe way. And there also haven't been any audits that we know of, which would mean an independent party coming in after the fact and going through the records and making sure that people didn't mess anything up. And as we discussed, there also isn't consent a lot of the time. So every single picture in the Registry of Motor Vehicles Massachusetts RMV database is available to law enforcement, again, local, federal, and state level, for them to use for facial recognition scans. So if you have a driver's license or a non-driver's license, because that's the thing you can get in the state, then that means that your face is up for grabs for the police or immigration or whoever to use for these sorts of purposes. And then the last one, as I mentioned, is the threat to civil rights and civil liberties. So there's 3 amendments in the Constitution that we're concerned about here. First Amendment was the one we were looking at earlier that talks about press, religion, assembly, petition, and so on. But if you're being surveilled all the time and someone can track whether you're coming in and out of a place of worship or going to a protest, they can see everyone who went to a protest, then that kind of infringes on your right to be able to do those things, right? Because if I know that I'm going to a protest and the government will have my name because I went to this protest, maybe I'm not going to go. Fourth Amendment also protects against unreasonable search and seizure. So in the same way that the police can't just like barge their way into your bedroom and start rifling through your closet and your wardrobe, we would expect that same sort of standard to be held up to when you're talking about technologies. And there are a lot of legal arguments being made that facial surveillance is kind of the equivalent of being able to rifle through someone's closet at any point, because you just are walking around and you can't hide your face. So everything that you're doing, whether the police have reason to be worried about it or not, is being kind of logged.
Or being stalked.
Yes, yes. And the last one is the 14th Amendment.
Stalker state.
Stalkers. Ooh, hashtag stalker state. 14th Amendment protects equal protection under the law. So that came about after the abolition of slavery and is there to make sure that people are protected equally regardless of race, gender, etc. And as we've learned from Joy and others, this kind of technology does not work equally for different kinds of people. And so if it's being used by the government, then different people are being treated unequally by the government. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so what can we do? So there's a lot of narratives going around these days about how technology is inevitable and we're just kind of on this incessant drive towards the future where Facebook and Amazon will be the rulers of everything. And at the ACLU, we're really trying to put a stop to that kind of narrative and understand that this is a democracy, right? Like the power is in the people, not in the tech companies. And so we can fight back.
So we're wired.
So we're wired, exactly. Some ways that that's already being done, we're working on passing a statewide law. See if you can peep one of our friends here. We had a big hearing with a whole bunch of people who turned out wearing these t-shirts that was going to, it's in support of this bill that would make it illegal for the government to get, use, have, ask someone else to use their version of facial recognition software and other kinds of biometric surveillance, which means voice recognition and also gait recognition, which are other ways that software can try and ID a person. And it would stop the government from using those technologies until we can better define rules for how it should be used and make sure that it's being debated in a public space and not being used in secret like it currently is. There's also some movements towards local bans. So you might have heard in the news that San Francisco, Oakland, and just next door Somerville successfully banned the use of this technology in their towns. And there are active campaigns going on in Brookline, Cambridge, and Springfield to also ban this technology in the future. And then, as was also mentioned, this is also something that's happening in schools. So we know that nationwide, at least 8 school districts are actively using this technology for everything from taking attendance to looking back through video to try and identify someone who vandalized the bathroom, all that sort of stuff. And in one community, Lockport, New York, truly. In Lockport, New York, when the public found out that this was going to be implemented in their school systems, they protested and they rallied and they went to their local government and they were able to successfully get a ban on this technology being used in the school district. So we're hoping to do something like that in Massachusetts. In September, the ACLU and 24 other partner organizations actually did send a letter to the state Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to kind of urge a similar sort of ban. So we're working on it.